Cron jobs can be a confusing concept for beginner developers out there, but it's actually quite simple. A cron job is a task or script that is performed at a certain time. This can be performed once, or daily, or monthly, or even every hour. It's up to you. Basically, it's an automated task. A lot of servers come with cron jobs built in, and all you have to do is tell WordPress what script to execute and when to execute it. WordPress actually has a cron job task manager built in. We want to set up a cron job that will run once a day. This cron job will pick a random recipe and use it as the recipe of the day. We're going to actually schedule our cron job in the activation function. Open up that file, and at the bottom of the function call WP schedule event. I'll provide a link in the resource section of this lecture for more information about this function. This function has 3 parameters. The first parameter is the first time this event will occur. We want to run this right away, so we'll pass in the current time. The second parameter is the recurrence. When will this function run again? We're actually given 3 recurrence options: hourly, twice daily, and daily. We want daily. You can actually set up your own custom recurrence, but we won't be covering that in this lecture. The last parameter is the hook that will be triggered. Notice that I say hook and not function. WordPress will create a custom action hook for you that you can then hook into yourself. Other plugins can also hook into this event as well. I'm going to call this hook our daily recipe hook. WordPress will then schedule this cron job upon activating this plugin. However, I do not want you to deactivate and reactivate the plugin just yet. We can now use this hook like any other action hook. Inside the plugin file, add our new custom hook, and the function we'll call is rGenerateDailyRecipe. This hook is triggered once daily. WordPress will take care of checking the time and calling this hook for you. Next, let's create a file inside the includes folder and call it cron.php and define the function in here. Include the file from the main plugin file. This function will run once a day at the beginning of the day. WordPress cron jobs aren't perfect. Unlike regular cron jobs, WordPress cron jobs won't run exactly at the same time every day. WordPress depends on a user visiting the site to check for scheduled events. For example, our cron job will run once a day at the beginning of the day. Let's say we don't get any traffic at the beginning of the day. If the first visit is 4 hours after the beginning of the day, then our cron job will run at that time. This is very important to know. WordPress cron jobs are not actual Unix cron jobs. We're almost done. Cron jobs are actually managed by you, the developer, so it's important to know how to manage all your cron jobs. Too many cron jobs can lead to slow performance. If we were to uninstall or deactivate the plugin, our cron job would still be active. WordPress does not deactivate cron jobs even if your plugin is inactive. We have to unschedule this cron job upon deactivation. There's a special hook called Register Deactivation Hook. It works just like its opposite, activation hook. We have to pass in the main plugin file followed by the name of the function to call upon deactivation. The function will be called rDeactivatePlugin. Let's create a file called deactivate.php inside the includes folder. This will contain the deactivation function. Include this file from the main plugin file. To unschedule an event, we use the WP clear scheduled hook function. This function has one parameter, which is the name of the hook. In our case, this would be our daily recipe hook. That's it. We can now safely deactivate and reactivate our plugin, knowing that we'll only have one cron job running at a time. We can now begin generating a random recipe of the day. To accomplish this task, we'll begin by using the Transients API. The Transients API is an API that allows us to store data for a certain amount of time. You can think of this as a cookie or session, except the data is meant for the server and not the client. It's exactly like the Options API, but with an expiration date. Inside the cron function, we're going to need the global WP DB object. Then we're going to make a query for the recipe ID. Let's break down this query. We only want the post ID from the post table. The WP DB object actually provides a post property that contains the name of the post table name. Next, we want to make sure we only grab publish post and post with the post type of recipe. Lastly, we want to order the results randomly using the random MySQL function and limit the results to 1. This query actually performs slow. There are a lot of examples out there that will generate a random row faster. However, this query only runs once a day, so it won't really stress the server. Because of that, this query will work just fine for our purposes. The last step is to set the transient. We will use a function called setTransient. In the resource section, you'll find the link to the Transients API codex page. This function has 3 parameters. The first is the name of our transient. I'm going to call this our daily recipe. The second parameter is the value. This can be anything we want. You don't have to worry about sanitizing this value, as WordPress will sanitize it for us. I'm going to pass in the recipe ID we received from our query. Lastly, we have to set an expiration time. This recipe should only last for a day. The time must be in seconds. We could just do the math and figure out how many seconds are in a day, but WordPress provides a constant for this. On the Transients API documentation page, you'll find this section called Using Time Constants. Here, you'll find a couple of constants that WordPress creates for you that contain how many seconds are in an hour, day, week, month, etc. The constant day in seconds contains how many seconds are in a day, so we'll just pass that in. That's it. We now have a random recipe of the day. We'll actually get the same recipe every day, since we only have one published recipe. You'll have to reactivate the plugin again for this to take effect. We can now display the recipe of the day inside the widget. Back inside the widget method, we are passed two variables named args and instance. Let's use the extract function to convert these two variables from arrays to single variables. This isn't required, but it makes it easier to read our code when using widgets. One of the variables created is called title. We actually want to filter this title by using the apply filters function. This function will trigger a filter hook. The hook we want to trigger is called widget title. The second parameter for this function is the data we want to pass onto this hook. Keep in mind that filters will return a filtered value, so we want to store this value. Any plugin that wants to filter the title of our widgets can do so now, including us. We're going to echo out some variables provided by the args array. The before widget is the HTML before every widget. The before title is the HTML before the title. You'll actually notice this is the same keys for the register sidebar function. I'm going to open up the widgets file inside the theme we created earlier. These 4 keys are the actual values for the variables we just used. Every theme will have different HTML, but since we're using our own custom theme, we know the values of these variables. Continuing on, we then want to append the title and then echo out the after title. We don't have to worry about the HTML. Styling is up to the theme. Next, we echo out the after widget to close up everything. Before the after widget, we want to echo out the recipe of the day, along with a link to it. So let's grab the transient. We can grab the transient we created earlier by using the getTransient function. We pass in the name of the transient we want to grab. This would be our daily recipe. I'm going to get the HTML from the static template and pass it in here. Now all we have to do is take the time to convert it into a dynamic template. This is nothing you haven't done before. I'm going to replace the links with the getPermalink function and pass in the recipe ID. Then I'm going to echo out the title. Lastly, I'm going to use the post thumbnail. That's about it. Let's check if everything works. It seems like everything works perfectly. We can click on this recipe and view the recipe of the day. This recipe does not have an image, so let's add one real quick to see if the image is appearing like we want it to. After you've confirmed everything, you could finally move on to the next lecture. That was a lot to do, but it was well worth the effort. Hopefully you understand how to create widgets, transients, and cron jobs.